Hello, I am your average everyday Nintendo fan you will find online, here to give you Nintendo's excuse as to why they're releasing pretty much every single goddamn game of theirs at $60 full.
Because they can, you should be grateful. Who doesn't have $60?
Why shouldn't they re-release Luigi's Mansion 2 HD at $60? It was the winner of 2017's most lackluster game from 4 years ago to revisit.
Damn, I love getting
Sorry, I let my inner Nintendo fan out. Now here's my outer Nintendo fan saying, wow, this is all way too expensive, don't you think? Why would Nintendo ever think they could price all these games at $60? Who could be convincing them of this? Today, I'd like to talk about the infamous Nintendo Switch tax. That's kind of the term used by many people to talk about a lot of things on Nintendo Switch that, for one reason or another, it's more expensive on here, or just the fact that, like, yeah, Nintendo and many other companies think they can charge a premium for non-premium experiences on Nintendo Switch. And this goes as far back as the launch of the system. I mean, we were seeing controllers and accessories just at prices that I don't really think we were used to. The Joy-Con controllers, for two of them, was like $80, and a Nintendo Switch Pro controller was $70. Keep in mind, around that time, for a DualShock 4 on PS4, it was like $60. The Wii U Pro controller was like $50. So then to go to the Nintendo Switch Pro controller at a whopping $70, things were feeling a little off. It definitely felt like, hey, like if you want to buy a couple of things for the Nintendo Switch, it was gonna be a bit pricey. And you can look at some games that launch with the system and go like, okay, like how much is that worth it? 1-2 Switch at $50, Super Bomberman R at $50. Couple of things definitely were a bit pricey, but let's be fair, it was the launch of a console. Things are gonna be expensive at first, but then prices will gradually decrease over time. We're still waiting. But I'd say one of the first big games that felt like a true ripoff, something that felt like it was just so much more expensive than it ever deserved to be. I'm talking Ultra Street Fighter 2: The Final Challengers. This was $50 damn, and it's literally Street Fighter 2 with like a couple of little enhancements. By and large, this is Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo HD Remix from the Xbox 360, Xbox Live Arcade, which, you know, was like, what, like a $10-something game? Or at least that's what the HD graphics they tout on here are based off of. Obviously, the game is, like, definitely retooled, it's rebalanced. You do have two new characters, Evil Ryu and Violent Ken. Oh, boy! They tout this as, oh, the first new characters in nearly 20 years! Evil Ryu and Violent Ken, come on. This definitely felt like Nintendo went to Capcom and said, hey, can we get like an exclusive something for Nintendo Switch? And Capcom definitely wanted to give Nintendo something, so they went with Ultra Street Fighter 2, which was probably a very easy, effective way to bring the Nintendo Switch its own Street Fighter, when it's just like, look at it, it's Street Fighter 2. Like, for $50, like, yeah, there's a decent chunk of things in this game, but at the end of the day, it's just Street Fighter 2 with a couple of superfluous little additions. Additions that have been a part of numerous Street Fighter 2 re-releases over the years, like, oh, online play, HD art, the Way of Hado mode, where you're doing Hadoukens with the Joy-Con controllers, like, I mean, that is nothing, man. There's nothing to this. It's not a bad game, it's Street Fighter 2, but at $50, like, I'm like, man, this is like a $20 downloadable game at best. But it did fairly well, to the point that, yeah, like a year or so later, Capcom released the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, which included like every single version of Street Fighter 2, basically every other Street Fighter you may want, and it was $40 at launch. Which, okay, to be fair, I think I misspoke. I believe Ultra Street Fighter 2 was also $40 at launch. What, does that make it any better? Still the same price as a game they launched a year later that included like every single Street Fighter game, including every version of Street Fighter 2 when this is basically just Street Fighter 2 with a couple of little like garnishes. And I think Capcom in these early days of the Nintendo Switch, within those first couple of years, they're some of the biggest culprits of just weird ass pricing on their games. When they were pumping out the Resident Evil games on the eShop, they were $30 a piece. Resident Evil 4 was $30. You had Resident Evil 1 Remake for $30, Resident Evil 0 for $30. You put those together and it's $60 for the Resident Evil Origins collection. And it really stunk because these games were all pretty much just the same as their PS4 counterparts. Resident Evil 4 on PS4 was $20, and this is the exact same version. It even includes a lot of the same problems that PS4 version had. It's still a fine way to play Resident Evil 4, but for $10 extra for like no reason, and to not include a lot of the things that would have made the Nintendo Switch version feel a bit more validated at a higher price point, stuff like motion controls, gyro aiming, like Resident Evil 4 Wii Edition is one of the best versions of that game. It might be my favorite version, and I think just having the option to use motion controls in this version, I think it should be in the PS4 version too, but still, I mean, like if this version had that, that would at least be something. But no, instead it is $30. Now, to be fair, these games notoriously go on sale like all the time. Like, I'm pretty sure within that same year, you could have gotten like all the games for like $20, $15 a pop. But still, there was just all these weird things, like even like the Devil May Cry games Capcom would re-release. Those, they re-released each of them separately at like $20 a piece. And it just kind of felt like they were experimenting a lot with how to release things on Switch. Felt like you were getting jerked around a lot, especially with cloud versions of games. Capcom has done a ton of cloud versions on Nintendo Switch, but you also have stuff like, the Kingdom Hearts games, Guardians of the Galaxy, Control, and the fact that all these games are like full price, I just think that's obscene. I think full price for cloud games is often, a bit of a ripoff anyways, but at least with things like, let's say Google Stadia, okay, rest in peace, or Amazon Luna or whatever. The infrastructure is there to the point that, it's cloud gaming. You're gonna have hiccups. It's not gonna be as good as, like playing natively on a console or a PC. But, with stuff like Stadia and Luna, you come to expect a certain quality of streaming. These cloud versions on Nintendo Switch, there's no real, like, standard for how they control. And right now, yeah, this just feels floaty as hell. I understand it's a way to get the game on the platform, but at the same time, I'm not gonna act like I know how the development of these cloud versions really generally go. But I know for a fact it's the easy way out to get games on the Nintendo Switch in some form. There might be a lot more to it when it comes to bringing cloud versions to the Nintendo Switch, but from my perspective, a cloud version is just streaming from a source and just displaying that image on your Nintendo Switch, and you're able to use your Nintendo Switch controllers to play the game. It gets to a point where you can stream games on an Amazon Fire Stick, and it doesn't really seem like it's like that incredibly taxing on the Fire Stick. It's not like they had to go and make sure the cloud version runs perfectly on an Amazon Fire Stick. So the fact that you're seeing these prices for cloud versions on the Switch is absurd, especially when you can get the native versions on PS4 for cheaper. Hey, at least the Resident Evil games here are on sale, but still, I mean, the normal price is $40, $40 for Resident Evil 2, 7, Village. It's just a little ridiculous to me, and it feels like it's taking advantage of a lot of the people that desperately just want to play these games in some form in the palm of their hands. Which at that point, like the PlayStation Portal for PS5, that ain't looking too bad. A Steam Deck ain't looking too bad. Especially when you factor in the fact that, on PS5, you can play physical discs that you can then stream to the PlayStation Portal. Steam Deck, it's just, you're gonna get cheaper prices on Steam most of the time. But hey, if you only have a Nintendo Switch and you desperately want to play Resident Evil 2, 3, 7, Village, I don't know why the hell you just have a Nintendo Switch. Buddy, you can find like an Xbox One or a PS4 for dirt cheap. Like, if you're so desperate to play those games, I think that's a better option than buying all the cloud versions on Nintendo Switch. But what about more standard releases? Well, the original Elder Scrolls V Skyrim at $60, that's how much it cost at launch. Hell, that's also its normal price. It's just on sale right now, but yeah, it says $60 crossed out. Yeah, that always felt a bit odd, especially when the special edition launched a year prior for PS4 and Xbox One, and that also cost $60 at launch. But, you know, by the time this came out, those versions were discounted, and this also isn't the special edition. You don't have mod support, you don't have the fancier, newer graphics. It's definitely not like a direct port from the Xbox 360. They did do some work to this. It does have a couple of exclusive little Nintendo Switch things, like, you know, you do have amiibo support, you do have a couple little Nintendo crossover items, and you do get all the DLC here. So I wouldn't say this is like egregious being $60. Now, of course, multiple years later, after 2017, yeah, why the hell is this $60? The special edition on the other consoles got discounted to like $40 as like their normal asking price. But instead, no, this is still $60. In fact, they also did something where they had the anniversary edition upgrade for all the other consoles, and they brought that over to Nintendo Switch. So this version, if you want to include that, is $70. Many times Nintendo Switch ports feel the most overpriced, and that's primarily because, you know, most of the time the Switch port is, you know, quite inferior to the PS4 or Xbox One versions. But when they're the exact same price, that's when it's like, all right, buddy, at least like knock $10 off. The thing is, at this point, it does feel very much like, even if these versions were like $10 less expensive and they looked as bad as they do, I think people would still be complaining. So I feel like a lot of these companies go, F it. We're probably gonna get just as many sales if we release this game at $60 if we do at $50. And hey, even if we don't, let's say if 2.5 million people buy our game at $50 compared to the 1.5 or 2 million people that buy it at $60, that $10 difference means a lot. They can be like, okay, we can probably put less effort into this, charge it for $60, and you know, we'll still come out pretty okay here. Mortal Kombat 1 being $70 is ridiculous. You know, this is only $70 because it's also on PS5 and Xbox Series X, where $70 is the new norm for price points of like AAA new releases. Not so much on Nintendo Switch. I mean, of course, you do have The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom being $70, but that was more of like a one-time thing for Nintendo. And as far as $70 AAA releases go, like, okay, yeah, I can deal with Tears of the Kingdom being $70. This game, no. Why is the Nintendo Switch $70? This is putrid. As far as ports go, this one definitely had a bit of a controversy because, you know, it didn't look and run the greatest at launch. I think over time, it's fine. Really makes me wonder why they just didn't do a PS4 and Xbox One version. If they could make a Nintendo Switch port happen, obviously they could have done the same for PS4 and Xbox One, but, you know, I'm sure they just want to phase those consoles out. But this, for $70, especially when it was in the state that it was, is absurd. The Nintendo Switch release should have been $60, and that's if they needed to keep it like full price on Nintendo Switch. $60 at the most, and even then, it's not worth it. The fact it was the exact same price as the PS5 and Xbox Series X versions, I think is ridiculous. I think many people will say, well, you're paying extra for portability. No! I mean, sure, at the end of the day, you're paying more for this guy right here. Nintendo Switch game cartridges obviously cost a lot more to produce than standard Blu-ray discs. Now, it basically comes down to the fact that, like, yeah, Blu-rays are made to be, like, cheaper to produce and mass-produced at that. Nintendo Switch game cartridges, like, it's a proprietary medium. Your closest comparison is, like, an SD card, and even then, these aren't SD cards, so these cost more to produce, especially for the bigger game. So if a game is, like, coming up to that 32 gigabyte max, the game cartridge is gonna cost more to produce, which is potentially why Tears of the Kingdom costs $70. They also probably charge $70 because they know they could. But that game is big as hell, so obviously it needs a big as hell cartridge. So they probably use that as a reason to up the price of the MSRP. This one right here, it still requires an internet download, and that download is 32 gigabyte. Oh my God. Can't even play this on a base Nintendo Switch. You need a micro SD card on the standard models because 32 gigabytes is just what's available on that system. And even then, a portion is reserved for the system, so it's not even 32 gigabytes in total. Yeah, this is a rip. But let's talk about some of Nintendo's releases themselves. This is one of the easiest ones to clown on because there's just so many things you can point to. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, one of my favorite games of all time, one of the best 2D platformers ever released. It was not worth $60. Now the experience itself, yeah, sure, I'd say that's worth $60. It's a full-blown game. The problem is, Nintendo valued it at $50 on the Wii U. The Wii U version cost $49.99 at launch, and then a couple of years later, they discounted it to $20 via the Nintendo Selects version. And when it comes to the Nintendo Switch version, they really didn't add anything. Yeah, of course, haha. The new funky mode, oh, that's fun. But to be honest, it's literally just an easy mode, much like how Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D on the 3DS added a mode where you had like 2 extra hearts, some extra little helpful things to make the adventure a little easier. That's funky mode. I mean, yeah, Funky Kong is a playable character. That's goofy. But when it comes down to it, yeah, this version runs a little better. It looks a little better, like it's 1080p now, which that's nice. The loading screens aren't choppy as hell. They were super long and really stuttery on Wii U. But I gotta be honest, none of those things are really like that crazy noticeable in this game. It's not really like, oh, a full remaster of the original. It's pretty much just a better version of the original, but like with barely any new additions, really anything that is immediately noticeable. So for charging $10 more than the original release, $40 more than the price that the game was at originally, because this released back in 2018, the Wii U eShop was still out. Some retailers were still selling some Wii U games. You know, they were trying. They were really trying to. And yeah, the current version of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze out at the time was $20. So increasing the price to $40 is absurd. But you know what's crazy? They did this again. Donkey Kong Country Returns HD on Nintendo Switch was a full $60. When, just like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze on the Wii U, this originally launched on the Wii in 2010, mind you, at $49.99. And then they put it out on 3DS with more content, keep in mind. They added new levels, and this was $39.99. That was 3 years later in 2013. And then 12 years later, they just kind of spruce it up a little bit and release it for $60. And hey, if Nintendo wants to sell their games at $60, of course, like I kind of alluded to, who am I to really bitch about it when I'm just gonna buy these games anyways? That is true, but I can also complain about it in the sense of this doesn't make sense consistency-wise. Why is Luigi's Mansion 3 the same price as Luigi's Mansion 2 HD? This is the better value through and through. It is the longer experience, a better looking experience. And Luigi's Mansion 2 HD as a remaster, I mean, it's fine. The game itself is solid, but Luigi's Mansion 2 is definitely the weakest of the Luigi's Mansion games. I don't think they should be like giving this away for free. I don't even think it's necessarily worth like, oh, just $20 on the eShop only or something. No, but like, at least give us like a bit of a discount, because $60 for this doesn't make any sense to me, other than the fact they know they can probably sell it because Luigi's Mansion is a very popular series. It sells millions of copies, so they're probably like, F the customers. Especially when something like Mario vs. Donkey Kong is $50. Which is still a bit high, but there is obviously a lot more effort put into this remake than Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. Because this is a full-blown remake, and they added content to this. There are 2 new worlds in this game. Plus, you have a new co-op mode, brand new fully CGI cutscenes. I really like this game. I think this game is a wonderful puzzle platformer. It was back on the Game Boy Advance, and it is still today. And this is the best version of the game. I would recommend this to anybody if it was like 20, 30 bucks. Because yeah, I do think $60 is too much for this game. And Nintendo agreed. That's why they put it at $50. And I still think it's too much for this game. It's really weird that they can tell like the value of some games and they will decrease the price accordingly or keep it lower, but not for others. And the consistency of it is really confusing sometimes. Like, why do they increase the price of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze in 2018 to a full $60? But then Captain Toad Treasure Tracker also released in 2018 for the Nintendo Switch, and that on the Wii U was always 40 bucks, and it still was 40 bucks when they re-released it on Nintendo Switch. These are all basically remasters and remakes released within the same year and a half of each other here. And these two are $60. This one is $40, and I think many people will agree Metroid Prime Remastered might be the most impressive one. Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door is a fantastic remake / remaster of the original, but at the same time, you know, look at Metroid Prime Remastered. And also at the same time, look at this. This doesn't look bad as an HD re-release of a 3DS game, but that's all it is. Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door and Metroid Prime Remastered, you can mistake these both as completely brand new video games. Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, I don't think you could fool anybody. Everybody looks at this. I mean, it's in the name. Having HD slapped on here like it's some kind of like price tag at like Ollie's, and then you're gonna have Sushi Striker: The Way of Sushido launch at $50 and assume everything's gonna be okay. This one launched day and date with the 3DS version, which was $40, and the Switch version was $50. Why? Again, this is like a $20 eShop game. I think they put way too much in this game to its detriment. I mean, it has like a full-blown anime theme song opening, like a bunch of fully animated cutscenes, voice acting, and I'm just like, hey, good on you. I really appreciate the effort. I think this is a very fun puzzle game. But it gets to a point that I think it kind of bloated the price of this game to the point where it's like nobody fucking wanted it. Oh, and don't get me started on the Skyward Sword HD debacle. Okay, $60 for this one, when on Wii U, similar remasters of, 3D Zelda games, Wind Waker HD, Twilight Princess HD. Wind Waker was 50 bucks, and then Twilight Princess was 60, but that included the Wolf Link amiibo. In my opinion, Twilight Princess HD, I think it deserves to be a little more expensive. I mean, like, yeah, they added a bunch to that game. Same goes for Wind Waker HD, but they remained $50. Without the amiibo, Twilight Princess was only $50. Skyward Sword HD, I mean, like, yeah, this is the way to play Skyward Sword, but, being 60 bucks, I'm like, come on. Especially when the original Wii release, for $70 came with a Wii Remote Plus, the golden Wii Remote Plus with the Triforce insignia on it. That was only 70 bucks. And, the game itself was 50. This time, Skyward Sword is $60, and then the special edition controllers are completely sold separately for $80. And even the amiibo they put out with this game was $25. Why? It is a very nice amiibo, and the fact, you do get two characters on a base, with one being a giant-ass Loftwing, and the detail is very good. But, I mean, like, hey, that just shows, like, how much prices are increasing, even though, like, in this case, with the amiibo's case, yeah, the quality has improved dramatically. I can't say the same about the game. I mean, like, yeah, this is better than Skyward Sword on the Wii, but they didn't really add anything when it comes to the core content of the game. Just confuses the hell out of me when it comes to the prices of all of these Zelda things. Like, what am I supposed to make of this? Breath of the Wild was 60 bucks. Skyward Sword HD was $60. The Link's Awakening remake was $60. This is a full-blown, from the ground-up remake of the original Link's Awakening, and it's $60. It is valued at the same price as this brand new game, this game, which is just a Wii game, but this one is $10 more, even though it is completely based on this one. And Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp shouldn't be $60. Whew, man, I'm sorry this was all over the place, but can you really blame me? Nintendo's prices are all over the place. For the most part, they price pretty much every single game they launch at a full $60. And they're gonna do that no matter what, so you can decide whether or not, like, each release is worth $60, or if you're just gonna wait for that elusive price drop that never happens for Nintendo games. What happened to Nintendo Selects, Player's Choice, Yeah, Nintendo figured out that, they want to keep all of their games at a high MSRP because they want all of their games to feel like they're worth a damn. Also because they know they can sell millions of copies of certain games at $60, or they can appeal to, niche audiences and sell, like even under 1 million copies of a game at $60 instead of trying to price it lower to appeal to a mass market that might not even give a shit. Even if, like, let's say Advance Wars was $30, how many more people would be like, oh yeah, I want to play Advance Wars? I know, obviously, at lower prices, more people will say, yeah, sure, I'll go for it. But I think Nintendo kind of, weighs out the options. Like, would we rather sell less copies at a full $60 or sell more copies at a reduced price? Like, how many more people are actually interested in certain games if they're cheaper? Sometimes people just don't want to fucking play some games. It doesn't matter how cheap you make them. They're just like, I'm good. I don't really care about this. And I think they want to keep the value of their properties high. They want to make sure it's seen as like, hey, like, our games are sold at these full prices. We don't discount. We don't sell them for much cheaper because we're worth a lot, damn it. And we're passing the savings on to not you. Some things do make sense. Like, I understand why some Nintendo Switch releases are a bit more expensive because of the cost of producing them. That game cartridge is more expensive. But it's a little crazy to me that a game like, let's say, The Witcher 3 on Nintendo Switch, I think that had every right to be like $70. Of course, at the time that released, $70 was not the norm for video games. But still, like, if any game had a right to be $70, I think it was that one. I know, they included everything on the cartridge. They included a bunch of little extras, and, there was no internet download required or anything like that. And then in 2024, we are stuck playing Luigi's Mansion 2 HD for significantly more money than Luigi's Mansion 2 cost when it released. Nintendo Switch dock being $90 has always been kind of like, what was going on there? I think they reduced the price since then. It's like $60 in a lot of places, but even then, I'm like, come on. Nintendo's been doing this thing with their special edition consoles where they're like $10 more expensive. Like, you look at the Triforce edition, the gold Nintendo Switch Lite, that's like $209. Okay. Same with like the Tears of the Kingdom Switch OLED model. That's like $360. I guess in these cases, they're just going like, fuck it. We can do it. We will do it. It's always just been a bit more deflating as a Nintendo Switch owner, especially considering like, hey, the Switch Lite costs $200. And then they charge you these fucking prices. And I just feel like it kind of just gets confusing at the end of the day. Like, why are these just like polished up re-releases of old games still $60? Because they cost the exact same as these games that are like brand new, that are fully worth $60. Like, it feels weird. And that's always kind of been there with the Nintendo Switch. The term Nintendo Switch tax has always existed. And I, for one, am sick of it. I am sick and tired of Nintendo overcharging us. And yeah, I'm actually in no place to actually be talking about this.